I'm delighted to be here as a representative of the parent, aunt, uncle, grandparent, great-grandparent of every super tall building in the world. And as such, it's a pleasure to welcome you to our home in New York. In 2006, after a lengthy dispute, and really 2.5, almost 3 decades of disagreement and disinvestment, the partnership group that I then represented got control of the operation of the Empire State Building. At the time, the Empire State Building was the international icon, as it still is, of the New York City skyline, notable for its presence on the skyline during the day and night, and for the fact that tourists like to visit it. At the same time, the 2.8 million square feet of office space that were within the building were probably, let's just put it this way, we were a high B to a low C overall as to what we were presenting to the marketplace. My own personal history with the Empire State Building began on June 1st, 1962. I was born approximately 5.5 months after my grandfather and father had bought the building, along with my grandfather's partner, Harry Helmsley. And over that period of time, between 1962 and 2006, a lot went on. The most notable of which was the general disengagement from business of both the original partners, my grandfather and Harry Helmsley, and my father's legacy relationship with Harry's widow, Leona Helmsley. And this caused issues, but it also caused opportunity. When I took over in 2006, what became apparent was the need for the Empire State rebuilding. And we started with a program to make this building the success that it never was. Anyone who is familiar with the building will know that its original name was the Empty State Building. That's how it was named when it was completed in 1931. And over a period of time, the building became the home to a variety of different uses. Mostly, however, sportswear, hosiery, ladies' accessories, suits, small showrooms. You may have known a dentist there or gotten a nanny from an employment agency there. But the fact is that when it came time to reposition the Empire State Building for the 21st century, I looked at all of the different elements and aspects of what was going on. At that time, the U.S. Green Building Council had begun to make certain inroads, and the thought to me of being green, of greening the Empire State Building, became quite prominent. I looked at it as one of the goals, one of the objectives for the repositioning of the building. We had 3 overarching goals when we looked at the sustainability piece for the Empire State Building, which very quickly morphed away from the U.S. Green Building Council sort of scavenger hunt for points, for bike racks, for showers, for signage, for a water feature in a lobby, for a green plant wall, and became more about energy efficiency, and became about using the convening power of the Empire State Building and the attention that it could get to chronicle, document, and prove that energy efficiency could be at the root of any building retrofit. And in fact, that we wanted to make change through making an example, a replicable example of the building, with the ultimate statement, if we only succeeded at the Empire State Building, that we would fail. That I really wanted to do something which carried forward a message of much greater length and duration. Starting in February of 2008, we collaborated and commenced with a team of the Clinton Climate Initiative, Johnson Controls, Jones Lang LaSalle, and the Rocky Mountain Institute. And we set about a program to demonstrate the economic viability of energy efficiency in the existing built environment. And what we discovered was that through the integration and the design of our overall program, for a very nominal cost, a very nominal additional cost, we could create fantastic economic return, learn very valuable lessons, and share these lessons with the world at large. And that's what we set out to do. The whole thing began with the Clinton Climate Initiative. And it began with Ira Magaziner, who was on loan to the Clinton Climate Initiative from the Clinton Global Initiative. Some of you may remember Mr. Magaziner from his tenure in the Clinton White House. And what he ID'd was that energy is consumption in cities is divided in a very unusual way. Most people think it's cars and buses and trains and subways, but it's really 75 to 80% in New York City buildings. Buildings are the single largest, by far, consumer of power, and therefore, by the way, producer of carbon, if that's a measure that you want to use, of any kind in New York City. And cities in general, this rings true if you're a more spread out city like Phoenix or Austin. The component which is contributed towards consumption by buildings will in fact be smaller than in New York City, but it still will be by far the single largest source of consumption. What did we do? And by the way, just to be clear, those numbers are true. $4.4 million in annual savings, 38.4% reduction was our target. We're doing better than that. And then, frankly, at the bottom is a 3-year payback for the incremental cost. That's that little piece there, 3-year payback. We assessed 67 energy efficiency ideas, working together with the team, modeling them out. We came up with 8 in the end. Window refurbishment, to the point about the UN. Radiator insulation. There's virtually no building in New York City where there's insulation between the perimeter heat source for the interior and the exterior wall. And I would hazard to say that's the truth around the world. Lighting and plug upgrades, air handling replacement, chiller plant retrofit. Mind you, not replacement, but retrofit. Whole building control system upgrade. I see you, 15 minutes. Apparently in 15 minutes I'm needed across the street. Ventilation control upgrade, and tenant energy management systems. So what we actually did were a series of low-tech measures and a series of higher technology measures. There's nothing that we did in the Empire State Building which didn't simply deploy something off the shelf that was in use already and put it together in a combination of ways that hadn't been done before. Take the window refurbishment, for example. There are 6,514 windows in the Empire State Building. We removed every single one of them, and we took them to a glass factory that we built inside the building, just about 5,500 square feet, where we disassembled the windows from the frames, and we actually took these thermopane windows and we cracked the seals and we took them apart. We cleaned the window panes of glass. We created a new box for them within which we suspended a Mylar sheet. And Mylar is oversimplification. We sampled through a tremendous number of different types of products, but we came up with a modestly polarized Mylar sheet. We resealed the panes of glass with a vacuum that was filled with krypton argon gas. We reused 96% of the original glass and frames. 96% of the windows and glass, the frames, never left the building. They were reinstalled in the building. We would do a section of a floor a night. We had attic stock that we would insert, and we'd bring down the existing glass. We took them from an R2, everyone understand the R ratings? We took them from an R2 to an R8. A 400% improvement. Our target had been R7. To be clear, a well-insulated solid stone masonry wall is R15. And you can get triple glazed R15 glass from Germany. Small pane about this big, cost about $3,000 or $4,000 uninstalled. But we redid all of this for hundreds of dollars per window. Putting in a radiative barrier. That is actually a new radiator, but the building does have perimeter radiators and forced air heat throughout. And we merely put radiation insulation to keep the cold out and the heat in, or in the summer, keep the heat out and the cold in. We provided the ability to operate with electric lights off or dimmed, depending on daylight availability. With Lutron, we actually created new fixtures that have infrared motion detector and light sensing within them, built in. Within 15 feet of the perimeter wall in every one of our 10 million square feet of office, these are the fixtures that must be installed. They automatically dim if there's enough daylight in order to reduce the energy consumption. It's kind of interesting in the Empire State Building how this works, because the Empire State Building was originally designed, as were so many other buildings of its age, to make the best use of light and air, because they didn't have air conditioning in general in the late 1920s. The bottom 5 floors of the Empire State Building were actually air conditioned when it was built. The balance of the building was not. Air handling replacements. We have so far replaced just under 300 pre-existing air handling units. There are typically 4 air handling units per floor. There are approximately 77 office tenanted floors at the Empire State Building. Every single one of these is a digital variable air volume unit. And we'll get to the overall purpose of these replacements in a moment. Chiller plant retrofit. Note, not chiller replacement, but retrofit. Through the insulation that we put in at the Empire State Building and the radiative barriers, we actually so reduced the heating load from outside the building that we were able just to retrofit the existing chillers, not only to handle the greater density of modern uses, but also in order to add cooling to the common area hallways, which wasn't used before. The whole building control system. It's the largest wireless building control system in the world. Why is it wireless? Because union labor in New York is very expensive. It's true. So we made everything wireless in the building. The thermostats are wireless, which actually works out very well when you design your space and 4 years later someone puts a rack of 10 printers underneath the thermostat and starts to freeze everybody on the rest of the floor from the heat that's generated there. The entire building is tuned. Every single pump is variable speed. Every fan is variable speed. The chillers are variable speed. Every air damper is digitally controlled. The building is a massive network. When the sun rises in the east, more cooling logically flows there. When the sun is on the southern exposure of the building, there is more cooling there. When the sun is on the west, there is more cooling there. Heating, by the way, the same thing. The old-fashioned model of installing the space and then balancing the cooling and heating is simply a euphemism for making sure that the most important person on the floor is okay with the temperature. The number one complaint in buildings is too hot, too cold. You wouldn't get out of the gate at a stoplight with your car at 6,500 RPM. You don't sit there idling at 6,500 RPM. That's what happens in buildings today. People come in and they turn them on, and at night they turn them off. The Empire State Building is a living, breathing organism. It responds to demands. It supplies where needed. With CO2 centers, we brought in chilled air or cold air from the outside of the building, filtered, improving indoor air quality and reducing the need for the use of chillers. The interesting story about this, there is no silver bullet to achieving the results that we achieve at the Empire State Buildings. It's silver buckshot. Not one item has more than 9% contribution towards the total goal of savings. Not one item has less than 2. Most are between 6 and 3%. Small steps, logical order, integrated. Within our tenant spaces, we actually have tenant energy management systems, which also report back to our tenants on how they are doing on consumption with key metrics. It's a dashboard into which they can dial. Tenant enthusiasm is phenomenal. When we took over control of the operation of the Empire State Building, there were 752 individual suites. The average fully escalated in-place rent per occupied square foot was $26.50 a foot. We now are signing leases that are in the 70s per square foot. We have LinkedIn, Coty, Shutterstock, Skanska, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, Global Brands Group, HNTB, Media General, Brightroll. Every single one of these tenants has either one or more floors in the building. It's completely transformed everyone's experience. By the way, we also put in a 15,000 square foot state-of-the-art tenants-only fitness facility. There are 7 dining options, soon to be 8. You may have read in the press how we have not 1 but 2 Starbucks in the building, 1 for retail out on the street, 1 which takes orders from inside the building and delivers them. The building is the most modern urban campus, self-contained. You can get your phone, you can do your banking, you can go to a brew pub, you can get takeout sushi, there's Chipotle, there's a deli, there's a white tablecloth restaurant. We're about to install a 7,500 square foot taqueria. But you put all these different things together, and it's in an 81 years young structure. The chiller plant, because we had excess capacity, we didn't have to replace it. We made a $13 million incremental cost to our overall spend of the Empire State Rebuilding Program. That's actually $20 million of new cost and $7 million of savings from what we had anticipated when we started this work in 2008. We didn't have to bring in any new vaults from Con Ed. We didn't have to put in any new chillers. We actually used less power with far greater density. So, where are we now? We are well ahead of our goals. We not only did the work, but we're doing year-by-year monitoring and verification. Anybody who would like, you can go to esbsustainability.com. That is esbsustainability.com. esbsustainability.com has every single piece of information you could possibly want about this project, including the contracts forms that we used and lots of other resources. Remember when I said on an earlier slide that we wanted to be able to impact the world more broadly, achieve replicability? Well, we have. The Moscone Center has used in San Francisco as just one of many structures around the world which has taken the lessons that we learned and deployed them. They're free. It's freeware. We didn't patent anything. We don't own anything except our own real estate and the cutting-edge reputation which we developed. You know, we were so outrageous as a concept going public with this unbelievable idea in 1929. But we're even more outrageous going public as a public company in 2013 with one of the most energy efficient buildings of any age in the world. The energy unit intensity of the Empire State Building is slightly over 70. The energy unit intensity of a typical building, office building in Manhattan, the median is 238. It's no colder, it's no hotter. We don't have any fewer elevators. In fact, our new, apologies to the person sponsoring this particular session, Otis elevators, not only have destination dispatch, however, when they go down, they don't create heat through brakes to regulate the speed. They create heat through a digitally controlled processing system which generates electricity, which is used to power the other elevators going up in the building at the same time. If you're ever in our building, in one of the new elevators, you see the little regen sign going off. It means that elevator is either generating or consuming electricity. Now, the one last thing I'll say in my remaining 15 minutes, just kidding, minute and 50 seconds, is that we've gone beyond this. What we learned is approximately 60% of the energy consumed in buildings is consumed by tenants. I went down to the Environmental Protection Agency and I said, you have Energy Star for whole buildings, but the tenants are the majority of the burden of the consumption in a building. So you should have an Energy Star for tenants. And they said, that's a great idea, but the Department of Energy makes the rules. I went across town to the Department of Energy. They said, that's a great idea, but Congress tells us on what we're allowed to make the rules. 4 years later, this past April, was passed a bill that creates something called Tenant Star, passed unanimously in the Senate, by the House overwhelmingly. It mandates the Department of Energy to set up the rules and for the EPA to apply the rules to a tenant-based energy efficiency design, construction, data collection, and ultimately consumption certification, just like Energy Star, but for tenants. This is what we call broadly scalable change. And this is what we set out to do. Along the way, by the way, we differentiated our product. We had massive tenant acceptance. It's been a tremendous source of attraction for tenants to our building and our success in getting them to lease.